How many people, how many people have a meaning each individually and leave, and people are like autumn leaves gone in the wind. When I was young, naive, fear, I still remain that, despite of life's lessons, I guess. I met, worked, in a way admired many pianists who came to the Fontainebleau Summer School to teach, to give a master class or to give a recital. Oh, we were so many of different ages, students, and with different agendas in our lives, who in January or who in genuine follow-up of their hopes, some researching for themselves and others between degrees. And I was, of course, the child, so for me time was infinite. At least it appeared so, didn't it? Robert Cassatessus. You know, he was a composer. You know, he was the chosen performer for the premiere of Gaspard de la Nuit by Ravel, who had him fetched through Fauré, his teacher and at the time director of the Conservatoire in Paris. He played My Mother Goose, the suite for hands with Ravel in Fontainebleau. Who remembers? I do. Now you do. Oh, this is silly. You cannot stop time nor memories erasing a lot of things which appear so important on the moment, meaningful rather than important. And they are. And I think there will be more in the future for more people on their own. It seems to me like since I arrived in Mademoiselle Boulanger's life, the postscriptum of her own life, so much has happened before, and she brought in some of them to Fontainebleau. Of course, who remembers Stephen Hicks, the organist? Wow. Giorgio Cuesta, the Italian organist, who built his own instrument to the plans of Frescobaldi. He was just fantastic. You know, when I was a child, I thought he was normal, but he's not. He was exceptional. Not because I took things for granted, you know. I wasn't that way because my parents didn't allow me to be that way. My teacher didn't allow me to be that way. I just thought that it's such a wonderful moment to have the opportunity not only to hear the people play, but to just see them be. For instance, Giorgio Cuesta had built in his little Fiat truck, bus, whatever it was, different wooden sizes um, suitcases to fit all the pipes of his portably buildable and unrebuildable and rebuildable and buildable organ. Just telling us it takes me the time of the unfinished symphony of Schubert to put it away. Just saying that sounded silly, funny, awkward, bizarre. Or then when I played on the organ with the olive touches of the wood for the keys, oh, it felt so alive under the fingers. It was a tiny instrument. connected with ropes to keys and stuff. Hmm. Then was André Marchal. You know, André Marchal was born blind organist of France who had such an amazing knowledge of the French Baroque, Titelouze, Clérambault. He played so much. He believed so much. He had such an enthused and expert. Well, he was an expert, but meaning choosing musicianship. Oh, he didn't believe very much in my organistic skills, I must say. After each lesson, he told me, vous devriez quand même continuer les nocturnes de forêt. Very discreet, but very obvious. He's saying you should continue studying the forêt nocturnes for piano. And the paradox is that every birthday of mine, Mademoiselle Boulanger organized a party for mine, well, during which I had basically a jury with all my teachers she invited. The Mademoiselle this and the Mademoiselle that and all the Mademoiselles. And it inevitably ended with, and Emile will play for us his 13th Nocturne by Fauré. And every time I finished, there was a long silence, and after a moment, she would say, it's not yet. But she didn't say what. Not yet that. And Monsieur Marchal, every summer, encouraged me to continue them. And you know, one day, one summer, I must have been teenager, I found in the music library of the Fontainebleau summer school a printed organ piece by Mademoiselle Boulanger. My God, I've never heard a piece of hers since Lily for her was the essence, and she put herself in ignoration of her own music, claiming it was unnecessary, well written, but not meaningful, blah, blah, blah. I didn't know how much all that was true or not, but I was always curious what would the music by Mademoiselle be, since she has this ear, this flair, this knowledge, this incredible erudition, and enthused um, and highly expecting and very hard or harsh critiquing. So anyway, I played this piece for organ on Flemish themes for Monsieur Marchal, and I asked him if he knows who is the composer, and he couldn't guess. So I told him it's Mademoiselle Boulanger, and I felt like somehow, very childish that I was, but I felt so empowered of enthused excitement that I brought her piece to him. And then I had my contrapoint lesson that afternoon in the castle with her. And so this time, at the end of the lesson, I said, I have a surprise for you, mademoiselle. I'll play for you something, pray. That was Freudian. I'll play something for you, mademoiselle. And I played that piece for her of hers. When I finished, again that silence like after the 13th Nocturne by Fauré. And then all of a sudden she says, I don't remember this piece. How much genuine or ingenuine this was, who's to know? Obviously it was written 60 years earlier in her life, so that's one reason not to remember it. But did she really not? Or did she just posture because of her statement that my music is well written but not important and non meaningful, and Lily's was in fact inspired? Which, by the way, it's true that Lily's is very inspired. Lily's music is like a perfume. You hear it and it stays forever with you. And every time you hear it, this perfume comes back to your memory nostrils and go, ah, Lily's music. There's something about the harmonization, the melodization, the bittersweetness, the drive while melancholy. It's just impressionist, but not fully. Symbolist in part, mostly. Well, anyway, Mademoiselle Boulanger told me that she doesn't remember her piece, and so I felt like an idiot, having tried to surprise her with her own piece. And then I finished by trying to find a desperate, I guess, on the spot, intuitive situation. I said, "Oh, you know, Monsieur Marchal find it very well, very beautiful, very good, something." And she goes, "Oh, he's not very difficult then with his tastes, is he?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." She really doesn't want me to pursue this piece, does she? But I must say, I liked it. Oh, perhaps it's because it's her. I played for Robert Casadessus, but perhaps because Jean, his son, who tragically died as a young 30 something pianist during a tour in the States, and his wife, Gabi Casadessus, who was a teacher many summers after his own death in Fontainebleau, were three members of a family they had during World War II's days in America, um, a trio of pianists that they were. And they toured in America, and he composed the concerto for three pianos. He composed the toccata for piano when Gabi Casadessus tried to organize a competition after his name in Cleveland didn't survive much of her hopes for the memory of his, because now it's the Cleveland competition, but they took off the Casadessus name. Oh, who knows? Money, grand stories. But you see, that's what it is. People forget. Perhaps it's difficult to remember everything. It becomes a phone book of names that you start reciting, and it, so then the point of learning is to discover who you are, who you become. And if you're overwhelmed with the past and the knowledge that you'll never have enough in detail of everything, everybody, every contribution of so many people, performers, composers, forgotten performers, forgotten humans, who once vibrated and enthused audiences or created just emotion through the pieces they played, the pieces that were meaningful to them and prettiful and emotional. My God, I heard Gérard Souzet sing French art songs. Later, I had the chance even to play with him, though he was vocally very tired at that point in his late life. But what a culture! What a culture! What an erudition! What a culture! Did they all have their weaknesses? Yes. Jealousies? Sure. Attitudes? For sure. Like, for instance, Henrik Schering came several times to play in Fontainebleau with his cook, his dog, his wife, his chauffeur. And then he imposed us 10 or 12 Mexican composers on course, since he was ambassador of Mexico for culture, because he was not Mexican at all. He was Polish Jew, and never really went to Mexico because he said that it was too high an elevation for his heart. So therefore, he always had felt, promote, play music of Mexican composers. So all of these things are so random, you see. They're in the memory of a young child, old man now, and they have significance. I mean, sitting through an hour and a half of Frescobaldi toccatas by Mr. Giorgio Cuesta should mean a lot today, like it meant then. But no, it's erased. People don't know. It's not that they don't care, it's that they can't care because it's too much to care for, I guess. So, what's the point of remembering? What's the point of cherishing those memories, those compositions, even if the ones that they rejected themselves? Who knows what it must have been when young Robert Casadessus played four hands with Ravel himself in Fontainebleau, Ma Mère Loi, my mother goose. He probably took all his memories of this incredibly moments of, I don't know, sharing or intensity or perhaps harshness, perhaps altogether. Nothing is sugar coated. It could appear like that when you evoke the past in some romanticized way, and people say, "Oh, but it's not true. You're being just overly emotional." And yeah, I am. I am. So what else is there? Just cerebrality, people imagining systems to make money, to make new tonal systems, to organize orders that people have to follow in new systems of things and say, this is modern, this is the new. Fine, good. Let them organize their own connection to people. Art is a connection. It's an imitation of life. It is a mirror of life, of our finitude, of our selfishness, of our shortcomings, as well as of our generosity, or perhaps our just silly humanity. Nothing special. But, you know, I still think that the memories with years become meaningful. And if I mention them to you, is because I feel like, hey, who knows? Bottle in the ocean. Somebody might hear about Giorgio Cuesta through this and find out where they copied by hand manuscripts of his, of Frescobaldi's toccatas, that he copied by hand and played from his hand score. One of a kind dude. He was. Maestro. Dude. Robert Casadessus had such heart. And when his son died, he couldn't sustain that. You could see him melting of physically, almost visually, of chagrin. Gabi, stronger than him, while holding herself very elegantly, survived both her son and her husband pianists quite a few decades. She always regretted Jean's death, of course. I remember Jean. I was a very small child. He was very kind to play with me as a child, meaning entertain me. I was running around. I don't know what we were doing, but then we played piano too. He was young. Well, to me, he was old, but compared to the others, he was younger. Mademoiselle Boulanger, Mademoiselle Dieudonné. Oh, Mademoiselle Dieudonné, Annetine. And all others were, Madame. There was Gilberte Lecomte. She was the accompanist for singers. My God, she knew all the repertoire from memory in every key. And when I turned pages during studio concerts or um, summer concerts in Fontainebleau's Jeu de Paume concert hall, I would stand up because she would make me a sign with her head while accompanying some Roussel or some Duparc or some Fauré song transposed in front of me in any other key than the one written on the score, according to the singer's desire or need on the spot, and in concert. And then she was angry with me because I didn't turn early enough. I thought already she asked me to stand up to turn pages when she had at least 5 bars going on the last line. And after the concert, she told me, "You were late turning the pages." And I said, "Well, I turned at least 3 to 4 bars earlier." She goes, "Oh, that's way too late. I need to see." But I said, "But Mademoiselle Gilberte Lecomte, you know it from memory anyway." She goes, "That's true. But nevertheless, I want to make sure." And she followed every time a singer was out of breath or too nervous to hold it. And she adapted the tempo, but in a way you never noticed. It was like, okay, ni vu ni connu, as they say in French, unnoticeably adjusting. Wow. Oh, she's not the only one. You can say that everybody who listens to this will say, oh, I know such and such who does such a good job. And that's fine, that's true. But then it was Gilberte Lecomte. And who remembers Gilberte Lecomte and all her knowledge and all her assistantship to Paul de Rennes, who was the voice teacher? And who remembers Paul de Rennes? Who remembers anything? And who should perhaps need to remember? It sounds like I'm some kind of a bitter old dude regretting that people forget things that they didn't have to remember. In fact, I just said it. It's exactly what it is. So why do I have to remember? Is it just nostalgia, which people consider some kind of disease, which I don't find to be the case? I think it's just a psychological state. But let's say that it is some kind of yeah, regret. Because for some reason, when I think of them, regardless that they died, regardless how many decades ago it was, they were vibrantly alive. Not just alive physically, breathing, eating, and all that. No, I mean vibrantly artistically, meaning um, through the art of music, in their skill and in their knowledge and in their ways. There was one of the piano professors who was there called Jean-Jacques Pinchot. And it was so easy to make fun of his name in French word pun, which would be hot bread for Pinchot. And if you switch the order of hot and bread, it goes Chopin. I mean, not as it's spelled, obviously, but anyway, and nothing to do with it. It's just that silly childhood memories of making fun of names, which is silly, and it proves how childish I was. But I was very respectful of him as a musician. He was a student of Marcel Ciampi at the Conservatoire. I'm not going to add who remembers Marcel Ciampi, but those who do should. Fantastic piano teacher, inspirator. And Pinchot was not a stratospherically inspiring piano teacher, but he knew exactly what to do. Dr. Shaw did the same in Bloomington. People make fun of her. She was awkwardly strong and sometimes divisively austere. But okay, people are as they are. Nevertheless, she was thorough and made, as Ed Battersby, who unfortunately died too, one of my dear colleagues, would say, she would make a wood piece play piano. Not that she was spoon feeding, but in a way, she had that incredible good um, knowledge of pedagogical teaching of skills. And so did Jean-Jacques Pinchot in his own way. So effective. And at the same time, he didn't try to elevate the debate above the philosophical meaning of the piece or some kind of, this and that quotes. He was staying down to earth, but extremely thorough. And of course, like all of us, when we age, we have our little favorite things to say, to expect, to demand, to reach, to touch in terms of stylistic, pianistic touch, in terms of his own experience, and of course his own tradition, his own teachers. And so you had this conglomerate of incredible musicians who perhaps were not all, as I said, stratospheric personalities, but contributed around Mademoiselle Boulanger to let Fontainebleau summer months of July and August become unbelievable, unforgettable experience of true musicianship for all these students, regardless their age and pursuit of their personal career goals. There was no competitivity among the students since they're not alike in terms of profile towards what they are going to do from their arts point of view. But at the same time, there was a thirst to comprehend, understand, capture something of what these people who had such different but solid um, artistic inheritance, we could capture some of it. I don't know if we knew what we would do with it or how we would deal with it, but it was meaningful to try. We felt that, we knew that, regardless of the language barrier, the age barrier, the tradition barrier, the ideas barrier, the competitive opinions barrier, the lack of understanding barrier. I mean, just human barrier, basically. Oh, God. What days that was. And we sang the cantata on Sunday in August in the church that we studied, sung every evening after dinner. None of us were singers, but we ended up knowing the pieces if it was written for us. At so many levels, it was an intense and profoundly innocent times. Perhaps for me. Obviously, not for everybody there because ages and times call for different ways of traversing life or crossing the street of life, whatever analogy. But I like to remember these people. They were meaningful, really. As long as they live in the memory, they're not dead. Not that death is not part of life and we have to accept it, of course. It's not only about some kind of narcissistic desire to be not forgotten for the sake of it, because in a way they didn't even ask for that. Perhaps they hoped or they were already at peace that they won't. I don't know. We never had philosophical exchanges at that level. I think about it in hindsight about Gabi, Robert, Jean Cassadessus, and their pianisms and their personalities and the tempi and the phrasings and the pedaling, as she used to say. My husband worked with Ravel. The pedaling very important, she would say. Not on the downbeat. I'm grateful and thankful to have been exposed to meet, hear, just be around the genuine musicianship and humanity of these few people who peopled that or this summer then between somewhere 1970 to 1980. How lucky I was to be there. I think I knew it. No, perhaps I didn't. I thought it'll go forever. Silly childhood thoughts. Perhaps I tried to prolong it through my comments to my students.